Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Fika AI. I am Allison Cosette, your host, and I'm here today with Kyle Corbitt from OpenPipe, and we're going to be talking about his thoughts on AI. So, Kyle, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, happy to chat.
Yeah, so we're here at the AI Engineer World's Fair. How's it been going so far?
It's been fantastic. So I think these kind of gatherings are super useful for just hearing what other people are thinking about, what they're working on, and then also, like, from our perspective, finding like what are the problems people are facing that we can solve, as a company.
Yeah, so why don't you tell our audience a little bit about OpenPipe and what you're working on these days?
So we make it really, really easy to move from a prompted model like GPT-4 to your own fine-tuned model. So fine-tuning smaller models, often Llama 3, Mistral models, things like that. We manage that transition, basically gathering the data, validating the data, improving the data set, and then ultimately training and deploying the model.
Wow. What are you finding people are the most excited about when they look to use OpenPipe?
Yeah, usually there's like one of three reasons, and they're all pretty common. One is just pure cost, so we're like 25 times cheaper than the same request with OpenAI, and that's a big driver for a lot of use cases for sure. Another one is latency. So since we're using a much smaller model typically, we can get lower latency, so it's about 1/3 of what you're seeing with like GPT-4 Turbo on average. And then the final one is like reliability or quality. So oftentimes with these prompted models, maybe you can get it like 80% or 90% of the time. It's giving you the response you're looking for, but then it still makes mistakes. It doesn't follow your format always necessarily. And fine tuning like really can nail that down. So it's always following the right format. It's using the right tone. It's just much more consistent in general.
Yeah. So is it mostly their internal data? Are folks using external data? What does that fine-tuning process look like across your customer base?
Yeah, great question. So definitely a mix. I would say more of our customers are using it on externally facing kind of products that they're creating. Because oftentimes with the internal ones, you can get away with higher latency, it's lower volume. And so usually it's like, very often it's like, hey, I'm doing something external. I'm doing hundreds of thousands to like, tens of millions of requests. And so that's where like the cost issues come into play and reliability issues are larger as well. We definitely do have customers with internal use cases as well. Just like general like internal business logic. We have customers that sort of like are using it for like data set preparation and some other, so they're going out and scraping a ton of data off the web, and they're trying to filter it down to things that meet their specific criteria that they need to then like further process, that kind of thing. So I guess that's like maybe an internal use case, but definitely spans a lot of things.
So what's your background? How did you come to OpenPipe?
Yeah, so before this, I was actually working at Y Combinator. Building software there. So I guess got and sort of bit the bug, or the bug bit me to start a company myself, working with all those really great founders. Part of that, I was at Google as an engineer and studied computer science before that.
So what was the moment when you said, this is what I need to do? Because obviously you've been around a lot of entrepreneurs, you've been in that environment. Like, do you remember the moment where you said, this needs to be done this way?
Yeah, so I would say it was kind of around the time. So first of all, like I've been following AI or machine learning was what we called it back in the day.
Yes,
for a long time.
I still call it machine learning too.
For a very long time, and so there were like a couple of sort of key breakpoints that led to, a lot of what we see now, but OpenPipe specifically. One was around the 2018 timeframe. There was this, we figured out how to be much more efficient with training models or changing the way we train. So now we kind of have this pre-training thing, which still isn't that efficient. You still need tons of data for that. But the sort of task-specific portion you need, like the amount of data you need that is very specific to what you're trying to do, is far smaller now than it used to be. And so that's one key difference that makes fine-tuning, basically makes training your own model make a lot of sense, because you don't need millions of data points, you need hundreds or thousands. And then the other one was really the release of like these prompted models, which was not something that like existed at all prior to really GPT-3. So I was lucky enough to see that from the early days. I mean, we were, Y Combinator and OpenAI obviously share a founder. We spent a bunch of time with the team there, kind of going back and forth. So I got to kind of like see that happening. And it was like very clear, okay, this is going to change the way people build, and this makes it really easy to get started from 0 to 1. And then like the fine tuning, the part we do, takes you from like, okay, how do I actually like scale this much more broadly?
Yeah. I'm actually really interested in the developer applications and how folks are using that. What do you see as is the changing nature of the developer in this new era?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously we're seeing a lot, so purely from like a user of AI, I would say it's interesting that like developers have been what really feels like the industry or the profile that's like adopted these tools the fastest.
Yeah.
And so that's, it's kind of interesting. Like I was actually just thinking about this earlier today. It's like, I don't know how much of that is because just proximity basically, because like, it's the people who are writing AI applications or rather writing AI models are themselves developers. So they like kind of like build the tools they need versus I do think like engineers are kind of used to adopting new technology because it moves so fast anyway, even pre-AI. So anyway, like, so definitely as just users of this, obviously it's a huge change, way more productive. I mean, when I'm writing code every day, which I don't do as much as I wish I did, but like find huge productivity boosts from these AI-powered tools. I use Cursor. It's an IDE that's like just really, really good at helping you kind of automate a lot of tasks as you're writing code. Also, I see kind of like on the sort of, not just as a user of AI, but obviously there's a lot of interest from developers on just like upskilling in this technology, learning how to build AI applications, learning how to include it in their own companies, basically like being sort of what at this conference they're calling AI engineers, sort of like learning how to apply these tools to whatever specific business problems they're working on.
So the other thing, my background is in data science, hence the machine learning terminology. So one of the things that we've seen is the role of the data scientist has shifted, right? They used to be us mathematicians, we're in a corner somewhere, doing our models. What are you seeing as far as how the relationship between data science and developers is changing? Have you seen any of that in your area? So especially when you're talking about fine-tuning and fine-tuning for a developer, what kind of interaction or input do you see from those sides in a use case where it's a developer application?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, I mean, what I'm observing is that, like, as folks, it's interesting, kind of like, so kind of on the user side and of the two categories I was mentioning earlier, or not, sorry, as like people who are building AI applications. It's interesting because to get something started, you don't really need necessarily the data science skill set as much. You can kind of just like write a prompt and like do a vibe check and like look at a few examples and get something out. But what we find is like very quickly once you get past that point, then like many of the same skills that like as a data scientist you've developed are become incredibly relevant. You got to figure out what a good eval looks like. You have to be able to track regressions. You have to have some way of saying like, okay, am I making things better or worse? And like, what is high quality data? What is a good objective, outcome for the specific task I'm doing? So we're definitely seeing like a lot of people sort of relearning those skills that are not traditionally, don't think of themselves as data scientists, and that's not their background, but they're having to figure out how to solve those same problems that data science have been thinking about for a long time.
So the other thing that I'm also really curious about in the training data that goes into the fine-tuning, what are some of the biggest challenges folks have with having the right set of data to really hit that fine-tuning outcome that they're looking for? What are some of the biggest challenges that you see folks face?
Yeah, I think, let's see. So it's really, really important that the data you train on kind of matches the input distribution of like the actual task that you're going to be performing. So that's like traditionally like a very large challenge. One thing that can really help with that, which is actually what we advocate for all of our customers, is to start by using a prompted model and without doing any fine-tuning at all. And the reason why is because then you can actually ideally like launch that into production and start seeing how are users actually using the system, like what is the input I'm actually getting. And then that gives you a much better sense of like, okay, what does this model have to be good at? And you can even use those inputs and then kind of like either manually relabel them or automatically relabel them, which is something we support on our platform to basically create the training data to fine-tune on. And we find that does a much better job than if you're just trying to guess and come up with synthetic data somehow of like what do we think people are going to use this for?
I'm a big fan of the logging and the understanding. And then the other thing, two more things I want to ask you, but one is, how does someone know if they should be fine-tuning or doing a RAG application? How do you know when, no, we really need to fine-tune?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way I see it and like the way our customers use it in practice is like RAG is really, really useful for getting information that is necessary to answer a question. And if it's like, hey, there's like this specific context, I mean, RAG just means like sticking the stuff in the prompt that the model needs to understand to do it. Like that's effectively what we're doing here. And I think that that's something you always have to do. Like even if you're using fine tuning, we have a lot of customers that are using our models with RAG. What fine tuning is really useful for is making sure you're getting like highly consistent output formats, highly consistent like reasoning over those inputs. So it's like actually always thinking about the task in the same way and like interpreting the instructions in a consistent way. And that's not something that you get from RAG, because RAG is more about like giving it the information it needs, and then the fine tuning helps you with actually getting output in the format and with kind of like consistency in the way it's reasoning over those inputs.
So they really one just like the fine tuning really just enhances what RAG does, and you don't want to fine tune without RAG either.
Yeah, no, yeah. I would never advocate someone if you have a working RAG pipeline, you should keep that pipeline and you should just like fine tune the model that's taking that context and producing your final output.
I love that piece about having that, looking at it the same way and having that logic be the same way every time. I can definitely see where that could be really impactful with what folks are doing. Then the last question I always like to ask is, when you look into the future, right? And as someone who's been at Y Combinator, you're from the Bay Area, you guys always have a pulse on everything. What is it that's coming up that you're either the most excited about or the most curious about? How is that going to work?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably a pretty boring answer, but it definitely feels like, if we have another couple iterations of jumps like the jump we saw from, say, GPT 3.5 to GPT 4, that is going to completely change like all of our lives. And it seems like, we're all sitting here at this conference and like, I'm building my company and everything. It's like, okay, but, like the world has changed out from under us, and it's probably going to change out from under us again, and that's a little bit scary, but also really exciting. And I do think that like that's something that people don't think enough about, because it's easier not to. But
so any advice for folks about how to look towards major change?
I mean, in my personal opinion, this is now getting like more philosophical, I guess.
No, definitely philosophical, and definitely your personal opinion.
So in that case, I mean, like I think it's really important that we, that at least for me. So I love work, right? And I love producing things. I love producing value. And I want to like prepare myself sort of psychologically for the fact that like maybe like I hope I can continue doing that. It's something I get a lot of value out of, but if AI come and takes all our jobs, like I also want to be in a place where like I can get a lot of value out of just like the relationships with people. I have kids, like raising them, like making sure that that's an important part. Hobbies, like stuff like that. That it's like, even if I'm not, I don't want to make my whole identity around, I guess, my economic contributions, because that could go away, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, we never know, right? I mean, I have young kids as well, and they say it's hard. We're not preparing them for a particular job because the jobs that are going to be available to them don't even exist yet. Right?
Yeah.
Neither of us grew up thinking that we were going to be working in AI, right?
Yeah.
So who knows what the future will bring, but I like your grounded approach, and especially as someone who's been at the forefront of that. It's really good advice. So keep yourselves balanced, folks. Thank you so much, Kyle. It was great to meet you, and we will see you all in our next episode. Thanks so much. All right.